enough. Well, look, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Benedict Roberts. I lead the offshore practice at Taylor Root. So effectively, I work with clients across different parts of the Caribbean and Channel Islands to help them find lawyers from the UK and around the world. So what we wanted to do today is give you all a bit of an overview of the Cayman Islands. As some of you will know, the Cayman Islands is the world's largest offshore financial centre, and as a result, it offers a range of opportunities to take your experience from the UK and go and practice in a new and hopefully very exciting and different setting in the Caribbean. There are plenty of chances each year for lawyers to relocate to Cayman, but for those who haven't worked directly with the island or directly with Cayman Council in the past, we appreciate it can be a bit difficult to understand really how and whether this move is right for your career. So what we'd like to do today is give you a better understanding of exactly that. Beyond things like sun and sea and beautiful beaches, we want to show you what it's like to practice as a lawyer in Cayman and the impact that that can have on your careers. So we're going to break this into three parts. To begin with, we'll talk a little bit about the legal markets on the island. Then we'll move on to some of the practicalities around living and working in Cayman. And then finally, we'll touch on some of the busier areas in Cayman practice and therefore what makes a strong candidate to go and work on the island. So we're very fortunate to be joined today by three of our clients. We have David Collins. David is a partner in the corporate and finance team at Walkers, and he's also president of the Cayman Islands Legal Practitioners Association. We have Shuvra Deb. Shuvra is a senior associate in the litigation team at Stewart's, Walker, Hersington, Humphreys. And then we have finally Emma Graham Taylor. Emma is the regional HR manager for OSIA and has lived on the island, I think, all of her life pretty much. So thank you to the three of you for joining us. Just to say before we kick off, we will have some time for questions at the end. So if you think of questions as we're going through, please use the chat function on the right-hand side. And we'll distribute those to the panel once we finish the main session. So first of all, Emma, if we could start with you, could you, OSIA is one of a number of full service firms on the island, but can you give us an idea of what that really means in Cayman compared to the UK? So for example, what are the firm's core practice areas and where do you focus most of your time?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think, as you said, like many of the other big offshore law firms in Cayman, OSIA offers a lot of similar products and services. And we work with over 47 of the 50 largest onshore firms globally. So I think a lot of the people on this call today may have had some interaction with an OSIA employee in the past, perhaps, or have worked on a matter with somebody perhaps in one of our offshore jurisdictions. But the core service lines that we have are dispute resolution, which focuses on insolvency, restructuring, a small insurance practice, and then contentious trusts. And I think that's probably pretty common amongst the dispute resolution offshore firms. Investment funds, including private equity, a growing fintech fund practice. Then we have local practice here in Cayman, so that helps high net worth individuals relocate to the Cayman Islands or structure their companies here, and does conveyancing for property purchases and that sort of thing. And then we have a thriving corporate finance and banking team here at OGA, as well as housing a fiduciary service line here, which is obviously registered offices and those sorts of services, which is an adjunct to the law firm. Does that answer your question?
Perfect. Yes, thank you. I think it's, I suppose, important to note that for you, a full service firm doesn't necessarily include all the things people might see here. So, for example, as you say, it's much more focused around those core service lines as opposed to this intellectual property or residential real estate, that sort of thing.
Correct. Yeah.
So to go into hopefully a bit more detail, David, as I said, David is a corporate and finance lawyer with Walkers. Could you talk to us a little bit about the kinds of transactions that you would tend to work on, and specifically really the major differences between what you would do as a Cayman lawyer versus your peers over in London or other onshore jurisdictions?
Yeah, sure. And before I kick off, thanks, Benedict, for the opportunity, and nice to be on with Emma and Shuvra. Cayman really, I guess what's important to note for lawyers from a transactional perspective is that Cayman is an investment funds domicile, principally. It's one of the world's leading funds domiciles. And what that means for us from a transactional perspective is that really all of the work we do in one form or another comes out of the asset managers. So, there is fund formation for the asset managers. There is also, on the finance side, even a lot of our work is really for the asset managers. So we do a lot of sponsor side finance work, things like subscription credit. We do a lot of hedge fund financing, margin financing. We do a lot of CLOs. All of that work really at its core is about asset management in one form or another. And so that's really what underpins this jurisdiction. And any certainly transactional lawyer who comes here really ought to have a good sense of fund structures and asset managers and how they work. In terms of the differences with onshore practice, I recall when I was onshore in the city, the main issue, I guess, or difference that I see is that I would work on one or two big transactions. They would occupy all of my time. The main difference here is it's more about sort of transaction management. You will work on many more transactions than you do onshore, but you will have a smaller role on each transaction. And so you're not as close to the commercial terms of any particular deal, but you're managing many more deals, probably a variety of deals, not as narrow a focus product-wise, but sort of a broader general debt or corporate focus, depending on your area of speciality.
Perfect, thank you. And then I suppose on the flip side, Shuvra, you're a litigator. You're obviously on the other end of, or the other side of some of these clients. Could you maybe give us a bit more detail around a litigation practice, your litigation practice in Cayman? And again, is it similar to what you were doing in London or even in other offshore jurisdictions? Or is it pretty similar or different, sorry?
Yeah, no, sure. Hi, everybody. Well, singularly, the work is commercial. It's of high value. You're dealing with big corporations. You're dealing with high net worth individuals, following on from what Emma and David have said. So the types of work that I've been doing in each of the jurisdictions where I've practiced, and I've flung my net quite wide, partially unintentionally, but I've practiced in BVI, Guernsey, Bermuda, obviously England at the bar for 8 years, and now here I am in Cayman. And I don't intend to leave, but I'll come back to that. So the sorts of work that I've been doing: breaches of directors' duties, enforcement of judgments, shareholders' disputes, corporate insolvencies, everything that goes with that. And there's a whole load of work that flows from that. For example, Norwich Pharmacol applications, interim injunction applications, holding the ring type stuff, stopping asset dissipation. And it's fast paced, it's exciting. I get to go to court, not as much as I used to before. So I guess that's the difference, because having been at the bar, I would be in court a lot more. But I don't consider that to be a negative thing, because here it's much more of a holistic practice. So I get to be much more involved in the whole case. Whereas, if you're a barrister, you just sort of get, dumped a file and off you go. And then as soon as it's over, that's it. There's no kind of connection with the client, which I do find that we have here, even though most of my clients, all of my clients at the moment, don't even live here for obvious reasons. So yeah, exciting work, never the same day. Difficult work as well. It's not like you sort of come offshore and just sort of sit on your hands and sign papers and that's it, you're a pen pusher. It's not like that at all. You're still doing complicated legal research, dealing with complicated cases, very demanding clients. As regards the difference between London, to go into that a bit more, and bear in mind for those of you who are at law firms that I was at the bar, so it would have been different. What I don't miss is schlepping to almost every single county court in England that I can think of. Waking up in the early hours, taking multiple trains, not having time to eat, carrying heavy bags, dealing with dreadful weather amongst all of that. So that doesn't happen anymore. It's much more of a civilized practice now. The sorts of travel that you will be doing once the world goes back to normal will be business trips to New York, to Hong Kong, to Miami, to San Francisco, where you'll be meeting with clients and potential clients. So again, much more interesting stuff. Again, really the difference between my practice in London and my practice offshore has been much more teamwork based. But I think that's the law firm versus sole practitioner issue. And for those of you on this chat who are at the bar, I think initially I was a bit concerned about having to be part of a team. Obviously, in my interviews, I was fine with it, but, in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh God, how's that gonna work? Turns out it's actually fine, and it's great because you get to talk through problems with other people where they're not looking at their watch thinking, oh goodness, I'm not billing, because you're all in it together. And so you get to talk things through together, and that's brilliant. I also think, there's a bit of a myth, at least there was when I was back in England, that the law here in Cayman and offshore generally is exactly the same as England, and therefore, there's nothing really to learn, nothing to do. That's a complete myth. So the common law here is very different. The statutory laws here are different. They're of course based on English law. That's where it all comes from. But we have a wealth of our own common law, a wealth of our own statutes, and it's all very commercially driven. So you'll find that judges are much less public policy driven when they're dealing with commercial cases. They'll make decent, proper commercial decisions. And I think costs is a fantastic example. We don't have reforms on costs. We don't have President H forms to fill in. Everyone knows that big litigation costs money, and the judges get that here. And so commercial realities are very much embraced here. And that makes practicing a lot more easy and a lot more fun. Yeah. Did you want me, Benedict, to go into anything about the other jurisdictions or not?
No, I think let's try and stick to the island for today.
Yeah.
If we have time, perhaps at the end, it might be interesting to hear some comparisons, because I know, well, both you and David have practiced elsewhere as well. But it sounds, I think, from all three of you, like there's certainly plenty of very good, very meaty work to sink your teeth into in Cayman, almost no matter what specialism you ascribe to at the moment. Outside of the office, though, we know that's very important to people as well. Often, yes, there are professional opportunities, but it's a great place to go and live for a few years too. So I suppose, Emma, maybe if you could start us off with that. One of the things that I hear a lot of the time from prospective candidates is that they are nervous about going to a new place where they don't really know anyone. Often they're moving on their own, or maybe they might be just moving with their partner and that's it. So I suppose, in your experience, sort of helping people come across and settle into life at Osia, how easily do they settle down? And, are there specific things that the law firms do to help, or, are there social structures on the island that are quite easy to plug into?
Yeah, thank you. So I think the first thing to remember is that at least 50% of the lawyers in most large law firms probably relocated here at some point. So a lot of the people rather, who you are working with had the same experience that you are having. So there's a lot of commonality, and there's a nice sort of collegiate, I guess, feeling about that. People understand what you're going through, and people are very, very willing to extend a hand and help and refer you around to where would you go to buy a car? How do you do this? How do you do that? But the reality is that by the time you actually set foot in Cayman, you've already had a relationship with the law firm that you're going to move to for at least 3 months, because that's what the work permit process takes. And during that time, you've probably become very familiar and quite good friends with the HR team, and probably very familiar and quite good friends with who your new line manager is going to be. Here at Ogier, we connect people with their peers during the interview process, and then that relationship develops and evolves once a contract is signed and an offer is made. In the relocation process, we introduce people to realtors, we introduce people to schools. The HR team has a huge list of contacts that we would put people in touch with here. There are relocation specialists that we can hook you up with to get you moved over to Cayman. And Cayman, of all of the jurisdictions, I think, in the Caribbean, is very, very advanced and modern. So it's not like you're really moving to you know, the Wild West Indies. It just isn't. Cayman is pretty much all mod cons. And so it isn't, I don't think, a huge leap for people. It's hot here. That's the biggest difference, I think. But there's so much upside for people in that it's a shorter commute, and you know, you can run home and pick up your kids and work from home for the afternoon and that sort of thing. And I think that just the lifestyle is so different that I think it completely offsets any of the real the jarring sort of changes in perhaps weather. But the other thing that happens here is there are a lot of BD activities that happen locally, and I think from day one most lawyers are engaged in that activity, and so you will meet a lot of other people from referring entities or other law firms, clients, and peers from other firms at all kinds of events that happen here regularly. And I think it's been more so since COVID, because we can't travel, so we're doing a lot more BD locally here. And then we include a local of an element of local culture and familiarization in our onboarding process, because there is, and I think most firms probably would, there is obviously a cultural difference with moving to the Cayman Islands, but Cayman is incredibly cosmopolitan. I think at last count there were over 100 and something languages spoken here, and the supermarkets are full of, you know, Waitrose food for those relocating from London, so you're not going to miss your croissants if that's what you're addicted to. But it's very, very multicultural here, which I think is part of its charm. And again, just to reiterate the first point I made, most of the people that you'll meet had the same experience as you did, and people are very friendly and will extend a hand to help.
I think that sounds fantastic. Well, actually, for those who don't know, Shuvra arrived in Cayman just a year, or I think 14 months ago. So she had a chance before lockdown and COVID came along to get used to it. I mean, so Shuvra, maybe just in a few minutes, could you know, what has life been like for you since arriving in Cayman compared to what it was before?
Sure, it's been wonderful. As Emma says, everyone's open and friendly because, you know, we have all been in the same situation. And it's eminently easy to make friends here because of that open and friendliness. And so within 5 days, I was hanging out with a great, wonderful group of people, not lawyers or accountants. But, you know, as Emma says, if you're inclined to hang out with lawyers and accountants, it's eminently easy to do so. As regards to lifestyle, there's a ton of sporting things to do. So if you're into CrossFit, F45, spin, bar, swimming, basketball, rugby, touch rugby, cricket, football, the list goes on, that's here for you. The beach is there for you. I make a point to go early mornings, you know, for the kind of running aspect and the peace and sport aspect. And then at the weekends, you take your cooler and a few drinks and sunblock and off you go. There's always something going on, brunches, boat parties, themed nights. You know, as Emma said, we can't go anywhere. So here we are making up things to do, and it's just great fun. As regards families, the beach and the weather means that you're able to go out and play with your kids. You can go for a walk and not have to worry about taking, you know, weather kit for 4 seasons in one day. And the families are very supportive of each other. From what I can see with my friends who have children, they, you know, club together, they get together, they hang out together, and it's just a really, really wonderful experience. Couldn't recommend it more.
Fantastic. Certainly somewhere it sounds like it's easy to stay for a few years at least, if not forever, as at least 2 of you have done so far. David, that actually is something else that tends to come up. People who move to Cayman, they think that they might only do it for 3 or 4 years. And I know, you know, just from our experience, a lot of people that say that to us initially end up staying there for 20 or 30 years sometimes. But for those who have kind of gone through your team in the past, after they've done their time in Cayman, what do you tend to see them move on to, either geographically or just in their careers in general?
Yeah, I must say that both Emma and Shuvra are very convincing there. So that was fantastic. In terms of what I see from my team and what I've seen over the years, you're absolutely right, Benedict. I think people come initially with this idea of I'll do 3 years, and what they find is they absolutely love it. I would say anecdotally, if I had to put a number on it, probably somewhere in the region of 70% stay on in Cayman. And, of course, there will be those who stay within the team and progress through the ranks into partnership. And there will be those that go out on the island and find other opportunities on island. So one of the things that's happened in Cayman has been the development of the financial services sector has been so substantive over the years that there are fantastic jobs for lawyers outside of private practice here. So we see lawyers who leave our team have gone out to insurance companies as general counsel there. They've gone into corporations, they've gone into local banks. I've seen a couple go to New York to work in-house at fund managers in New York. So, the truth is that these firms, Ogier, Chuvra's firm, Walker's and others, they're all fantastic places to work, good for your CV. You will move on to other opportunities if that's what you want. But I tend to see people coming and staying and sort of trying to stay in a private practice career really for as long as they can.
I think it does always surprise me the change that I see in people after, say, 2 years after they arrive. And I'll sit with someone who confidently told me they were going to go out, they were going to earn their money and then come back and buy a house. And suddenly they are buying a house, but it's up in 7 Mile Beach somewhere, and they can't imagine ever leaving again.
Yeah, well, I think what's true, Benedict, in my experience, is that no one ever goes back to the city. I don't think I've seen anyone ever go back to the city. And I don't know if Emma and others have had a different experience, but that's been mine.
No, I agree with you. Back in my youth here, when I used to work in the hospitality industry, and I would bartend, and I would serve a lot of lawyers and accountants behind on the other side of the bar, and they would say, "Oh no, I'm just here for 2 years." And me and my bartending colleagues used to joke that it was like Hotel California here, and that you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave, and nobody ever leaves. And I have never ever heard of anybody going back to work in the city after they've worked in the Cayman Islands.
It's a difficult argument to make, getting back on the Northern Line, really, isn't it? So, David, actually, if we could stay with you just around the kinds of people that you have hired and would want to hire in the future. Obviously, earlier on, you told us a bit about the different specialisms within your team and the different kinds of work that you would deal with. So aside from obvious things like good academic background and a good training contract, if people are thinking they would like to come to Cayman in the next couple of years, are there particular types of technical experience that are going to make them more attractive to you or to a firm like Walker's that maybe they could try to develop over the next however long before they make their applications?
Benedict, we don't really, and certainly I don't focus so much on the technical aspects when I recruit. And what we look for first is the right person. Is this someone who can fit within the team? Do they have the right sort of human qualities? And the reason for that is that, if you've been at a top firm in the UK, a top 20 firm, and you've been in a practice doing cross-border finance work or cross-border working for asset managers, establishing funds, you will be able to do the work that we do here. So really the sort of technical aspects is not the sort of threshold aspect, really. It's more about fit and personality, and are you someone who's open-minded, and will you be able to live and settle in Cayman? Those really are the factors for me that make a difference. If I had to point to one technical thing, I would say, of course, given what I said earlier about Cayman being a jurisdiction for asset managers, if you have any experience working for fund managers and an understanding of fund structures, then that helps. It doesn't mean that you have to be a funds lawyer, but you may have come across funds as counterparties on financing transactions, for example. And it's always helpful to have a familiarity with fund structures, but it's not essential.
Perfect. So that's, I suppose, hopefully quite good news for people, especially if they're acting in other kinds of financing transactions, but nevertheless are hoping to make that kind of switch. I mean, David touched on it there, Emma, but each firm will have its own, as they do all over the world, will have its own distinct culture. So outside of technical skill set and perhaps building on what David said, are there any sort of skills and traits that Ogier particularly looks for in their candidates? And I suppose, are there any general skills that make you think, yes, this sort of person is going to adapt to life in Cayman well, they're going to fit into the kind of culture of the island, that sort of thing?
Yeah, thank you. In fact, before I get into the OGIA specific aspect of that question, I want to just reiterate and back up what David said, because I think that that is really important for both parties, for both law firms recruiting into Cayman and for people considering making a move offshore. We're looking for people who will be able to settle and will be happy here, and it's really important that we find that right fit. It's a big step to take for people, and it's a big investment for firms here to make, and so it's really important to us to find the right fit of people. You know, most of the people I would imagine who we're talking to today are, if not all, are super bright, working for great firms, and so their resumes would be attractive to the law firms in the Cayman Islands, but it really is very much about the person. And to that end, I think all of the big firms here are amazing places to work, and all of them have slightly different value propositions for their employees. And I think at OGA, we consider ourselves to be one of the places that is quite tech savvy, forward thinking, process driven. We're looking for people who have interests outside of the practice of law. We want well-rounded individuals. I think if you're moving with a partner or a spouse, it's really important that that person's happiness is also considered. When I've seen people fail in a move offshore, it's generally speaking because 50% of that team isn't happy, and I think that's really important to us too, to investigate that, and it's really important for candidates to have a proper investigation of that before they move. You know, are both parties going to work? Is there work for whatever the person who's coming with you does? We're very open from day one here at OGA. All ideas are valued equally. So right from, you know, the most junior administrator to the most senior partner, we're very keen to hear people's ideas, and people here are empowered to give it a go. And there's very little judgment for failure. A well thought out idea that's well executed that doesn't work is okay. We just course correct and carry on. I think I touched on the tech savvy aspect of it, and in innovation. All of our employees are trained in Lean Process Six Sigma, and everybody here is a white belt, which doesn't mean we're teaching jujitsu to people, but it's a process methodology that we apply to everything that we do. And so that's a very specific type of skill and a very specific type of person that we're looking for. And then we're really looking for people who are good team players. I think Shivra touched on this earlier, in that I think perhaps sometimes in onshore firms, and particularly in litigation or at the bar, you don't work as a team. Or maybe you're a really small cog in a wheel on a much bigger matter. As David said, you know, some of the onshore work is that you're working on one or two really large matters. Here you've got a dozen matters on your desk is probably a low work day for lawyers in the Cayman Islands, but you are part of a team and you're all working together, and it's a much smaller team here. You're not there's not 10 associates on one deal. It's you and a partner perhaps, and so people who are going to work well in that environment and who are collaborative, I think, is what we look for as well. I could go on forever, but I won't. I think I've probably given a good summary.
Fair enough. Well, thank you. And then I suppose lastly, Shivra, from your perspective, you know, you've been on the other end of these processes that we've been talking about. I mean, how did you find the process of getting to Cayman in the first place? I know you came via a couple of other offshore jurisdictions first, but when you were first applying to move offshore, to leave the bar in London, did you find it a straightforward process? Were the interviews quite easy, or not? Well, easy to navigate at least. And what do you think it was about you that first made them interested in bringing you on board?
Yeah, I actually did find the process easy to navigate, because there is a process. And so once you know what the parameters are, you can, you know, follow them. Following on from what David said, the fact that I had been fortunate enough to have two cases where I'd had an offshore experience. Interestingly enough, there were two Cayman fund cases, if I remember correctly, and I sort of led with them in as much as I could on my CV. And I was also, you know, looking at my experience in the last 8 years at the bar, thinking, well, what did I enjoy the most in that time? And it turned out, I could honestly say that, oh, those 2 cases were actually the most interesting cases I'd had. And so if you can show that level of commitment, I suppose awareness, knowledge, and enthusiasm about offshore practice and what that is, then I think that's a fantastic thing that will set you apart. I think for me, the firm that hired me in BVI was looking for an advocate who'd be able to take on applications in court that didn't justify bringing in a silk from England. And so that was, again, a quality I had that kind of allowed me to make the transition. Yeah, the interview process, or just generally, I mean, the interviews were definitely not easy at all. And if anything, I ended up being interviewed for a week by 2 different firms. It was all very strange, but also quite fun, because the first part of the interview in BVI was going on a chicken bus. How is she going to cope with eating fried chicken on the side of a dusty road? Turns out I loved it. It was just so different from anything I'd ever done before. And the next part of the interview was, right, let's take her to the beach and throw her on a surfboard and see how she copes with that. And again, that was great. I think that was quite unique to BVI, though. I'd be surprised if any Cayman interviews kind of went like that. But then next came the more serious part of it, and spent a whole day being interviewed in a boardroom by various different partners and associates. And again, it was a mutual exploration process. As Emma has said as well, it's really important for both sides to know that the relationship is going to work out and that the candidate is committed. So, do your research, think long and hard, and be committed. Because I think also in Cayman, there's a much lower attrition rate, which David has touched on. And so firms want to see that you will hang around.
Well, I guess good then to get that chance, as you say, to speak to them a little bit more perhaps during the interview process, and maybe get to know them in a slightly less formal setting at the beach or the bus stop, apparently, than you would do with a firm in England. Look, we are going to move on to some Q&A that we've had through from our audience over the last half hour or so in a moment, but you've all been very diligent in not mentioning COVID. I know that a lot of, certainly webinars we've run, have been dominated by this issue. That said, I know that you've had a very different experience over the last few months than we have in England, and unfortunately, most other European countries have had with lockdowns. I suppose really to any of you, if we just start from left to right with Emma, do you want to tell us a little bit about how Cayman has coped over the last few months while we've all been locked up at home working from our spare rooms?
Sure. We're really, really lucky here. Our government did a fantastic job in containing the virus situation, and we now are in the very fortunate position in Cayman to be continuing life as normal. It's not, obviously, because none of us can really leave, although David will get to that, I'm sure, when he talks to you. But we don't wear masks. There's no social distancing. There are no on days and off days when you can go to the shops. It really is life as normal here, which is a real bubble. And I've just had an employee return from Scotland he went for a family visit with his wife and child, and they've just returned and are quarantining. And he emailed me and he said, when do I need to resubmit for my next work permit? He said, because I need to do it right now, because I need to make sure that I don't have to leave Cayman ever again. and he said, he said, it's tough. The UK is tough right now, and Cayman is not. And it's lovely here, and we have an enormous number of freedoms that other places in the world don't have. So I think I'll let Shuvra and David say their piece on this, but.
Perfect. Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm not on mute. Perfect. Please, then, I suppose, Shuvra, then, your life, again, over the last few months sounds like it would have been radically different to ours.
Yeah, sure. Similarly, I had to fly home for a family emergency in June, managed to do a turnaround in a month, which was a minor miracle. And the experience I had of England back in June was similar to Emma's colleague. And, I've come back to the office and said to my boss, I'm never leaving ever again. Make sure you don't forget to renew my work permit. So had the same conversation. The start of we did have a brief lockdown period here where we were working out of kitchens and spare rooms and things, but that passed quite quickly. And as of I think June, middle of June, early July, whatever it was, we've been back to normal. I sometimes forget there's a situation out there. I speak to my dad daily and he has to remind me that there's stuff going on out there. So it really has not touched us at all. And we are, as everybody says, and I think we acknowledge this every day, we are very, very fortunate.
Perfect, thank you. And then lastly, as the others have alluded to, David, you're possibly in the best quarantine spot I think I've seen of anyone I've spoken to over the last 6 months.
Yeah, you know, as the others have said, we are incredibly lucky here, and you know, Cayman is a fantastic place to be right now. Of course, you know, we do feel it for everyone around the world who's not as fortunate as we are. I might, Benedict, just touch a little bit on the impact of COVID on business, and there are a couple of things that sort of come to mind that are relevant for recruits. One is there's been a real move towards flexible working on the island and towards formalizing flexible working, which I think makes legal practice here look and feel a lot more like London for recruits, insofar as, you know, London has always been progressive by comparison to Cayman historically in terms of flexible working. And then the other thing I would mention is, you know, when I would be out in London often recruiting, I would always, one of the things I would love to talk about is the opportunity to do business development. And, you know, I would, with recruits, after they'd been in the firm for a while, we'd be up in New York, we'd be in Charlotte, we'd be back in London, really meeting clients and developing those skills. And I think one of the things, unfortunately, one of the results of COVID is that that sort of approach isn't likely to return anytime soon. And so, you know, we have to find other ways, if you like, to develop business, at least for the moment, but hopefully that will come back, and that will be, again, part of the experience that we can offer to new recruits who come.
I think that's fair enough. I think we're all at the moment maybe waiting a little bit to see what the world will be like post-COVID. As you say, it will be different, but hopefully on the whole, a better place for it. Okay, well, look, thank you certainly to our audience who've been sending some questions in as we've gone along. Actually, David, if we could maybe stay with you for this first one, because I know that Walkers in particular has done quite a lot of work in this area. We have one person, I won't read out his name, but who says, how are the opportunities for financial regulation solicitors, just considering how locally specialised that practice can be?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So one of the things that's changed in Cayman practice over the last few years is there is this new regulatory overlay. And what that means is that there are new practices that have sort of sprung up in the last 18 months or so, specifically to focus on regulatory work. Prior to that, what we saw was we would have lawyers within the wider transactional practice that would focus on regulatory as part of their sort of wider practice. Now the market here is moving more towards specialist regulatory lawyers because the regulatory environment has changed so much in the past few years. So that's definitely an area of growth. It's an area that, to me, every firm actually ought to be looking to develop in that space. So I think it's one of the growth areas here, and the timing should be right for regulatory lawyers now to find roles in specialist practices here.
Perfect. Yeah, I think so. And as we say, we've done some work in this area. So if anyone would like to follow up with us, we can give you some further advice on that point as well. Next, I suppose this one's possibly better for, well, it could be for any of you, but let's start with Emma at least. The introduction of economic substance legislation in Cayman has or could change slightly the client profile that you're dealing with on the island. Is that something that Ogier is looking at, and then, you know, do you have any predictions for how it might change your approach in the years ahead?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think all the firms are looking at this. I think it remains to be seen what the wider impact is, but we continue to get busier and hire in. Just since COVID, we've hired in 22 people here in Ogier in Cayman, and not seen anybody leave, which is fantastic. And yeah, with regard to economic substance, I think it's probably going to be economically very good for the island, and I don't see that yeah, I don't really have a better answer than I think it's going to be very positive for Cayman, for business, and also from an HR and economic perspective for the island. I don't see that it can be a bad thing.
But perhaps maybe, David, some of those jobs that you were talking about earlier with sort of former colleagues moving in-house to insurers and banks and what have you, do you think you could see it leading to more of those sorts of opportunities?
Absolutely. Look, I agree with everything that Emma has said. One of the changes we are seeing in the market here is that it is becoming more onshore. There is a real push towards substance here in the wider financial services economy, and that can only be a good thing for jobs, for legal sector jobs. So yeah, I agree with everything Emma has said, and won't add too much more to that.
And then Shuvra, we have one for you from somebody else. They've said, bearing in mind that it may be difficult on the basis that you were at the bar, in what way has your day-to-day hours and work-life balance changed since you arrived in Cayman?
Right, compared to the bar. I suppose I technically have a structure, whatever my hours are. I think they're 8:30 till 5 or 5:30, I don't even know. And the reason I don't even know goes back to what David says about the flexibility. So since all the COVID business happened, unless we need to be in the office for something, there's a meeting or we need to use some tech facilities, whatever, work at home. By all means, get the job done. Doesn't matter where you do it, how you do it, just get it done. I actually find that my work-life balance has improved since leaving London because there's less uncertainty. I'm not sitting around until sort of 5, 6, 7 in the evening waiting for a brief that may or may not come through. So that's actually really nice. I can actually, yeah, now that I think about it, I can actually make plans in the evening, which for years I couldn't, or I'd have to take out the caveat of I might have to cancel on you with 2 minutes notice. And that used to happen from time to time. And of course that can happen here as well. You know, something might kick off, there might be an urgent application that needs to be made, but there is much more balance here. So that aspect of my life has definitely improved.
So not as many sort of long evenings and weekends then as you were used to before?
No, not at the moment. If the work's there, then yes. And we do have the work, but I managed to get it done in the day. So maybe I've got better at time management.
Benedict, if I could just jump in on that, I think that it's really important to note that people in the financial services sector here still work really hard and do really good, chunky, meaningful work. But I think that the work-life balance and probably put in comparable hours to the hours of a lot of people in onshore firms. But the difference here, I think, is that if you live on an island, your commute to your home is probably 10-15 minutes, so you get back so much time, and then added to which a lot of firms now, and Osier is not unique in that regard, except that I think we've been doing this for a really long time, are very flexible, and people have full home kits and setups with 2 screens and a computer or a Surface or whatever, and a full setup in your office at work. And so you can plug it, don't get into the school rush hour traffic, plug in and work for the first 2 hours from home if you're not dropping kids to school, and then go into work to collaborate and then go home. So I think that that's the big difference, really, is that you get a lot of time back where you would have spent time just sitting on a bus or on a train or standing waiting for something to happen.
Perfect. And I guess the life outside of work can be a little bit more interesting and varied, when you do get out. So it's certainly not as easy to just pop to a Caribbean beach for the weekend if you're living in South London. So well, look, I think that's around about all of the time that we have. I'm sorry that we didn't get through quite all of the questions, but we will post answers to those on the events page on the Taylor Root website. Look, thank you so much to our panelists, to Emma, Shuvra and David for being with us today. I think then we will leave it there, but please do feel free to follow up with me if you have further questions, or if you'd like any sort of further advice on moving offshore, if this has kind of piqued your interest. I just actually like to wrap up then just by going to each of you and asking if you have any piece of advice that you'd give to someone who might now be considering moving to Cayman. What would you like to say to them if you could speak from the benefit of your experience? Sorry, should we start with David?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, from my perspective, the main thing is just be open-minded. And, I think generally that's a hallmark actually of expats, people who travel to work generally are open-minded. And, the most successful lawyers that we recruit are the ones who come in and say, yeah, I may not have seen that before, but I'll try my hand at it. It's that sort of being sort of expansive in how you think, rather than sort of narrow, if you like. And so that's really it. Be open-minded, and you'll do well generally.
Perfect. Thanks. And Shubhra?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Be open-minded. Going back to what I said before, do your research, make sure you actually do want to make the move. And then once you've committed to it, do it, be open-minded, and yeah, you'll fly.
Perfect. And Emma?
Run, don't walk.
Get there soon.
What are you waiting for?
Perfect. Well, look, as we said at the beginning, as we know, there's plenty of opportunities still to go over to the island at the moment, and I'm sure there will be more next year. So hopefully you'll see some of our attendees in your offices at some point in the future. Right. Well, look, again, thank you very much to our panel. Thank you to everyone for watching, and we will leave you to get on with your afternoons. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.